Picture this. It's the 13th century in rural China. The air is thick, it's high summer, and a prominent local landowner has just been found dead by the side of a dirt road.
Okay, setting a very dark scene right off the bat.
Yeah, well, it gets darker. His throat is cut. He's completely bled to death. So the local headman calls in a magistrate named Sung Tz'u to investigate the whole thing.
Right, the famous Sung Tz'u.
Exactly. Now, he suspects the murder weapon is a sickle. But, you know, they're in a farming community, so literally everyone has one. And of course, there's no weapon left at the scene.
So what does he do? I mean, without modern tools, that sounds impossible.
Right. Well, he gathers all the local workers and he makes them lay their sickles on the ground in the blistering hot sun. And he just waits.
Just wait.
Just waits. And within minutes, a swarm of blowflies descends. But they don't just land randomly, you know, they all collect on one single blade.
Oh, wow. Because of the blood.
Exactly. They're drawn to the invisible, microscopic traces of blood and tissue that the human eye completely missed. And the owner of that sickle, well, he immediately confesses, and the case is closed.
That is just, it's an incredible moment in the history of criminal justice.
Yeah, it really is.
Because Sung Tz'u is essentially conducting a biological field test centuries ahead of his time. He's, utilizing the natural behavior of insects to reveal trace evidence that human perception just couldn't detect.
It's absolutely brilliant, and it perfectly sets the stage for what we're doing today. So welcome to this deep dive into M.J. Trow's fascinating book, In the Shadow of the Ripper, How Forensic Science Failed to Catch Jack.
It's a great book.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore the bizarre, frustrating, and honestly, sometimes comical evolution of murder investigations. We're going on a journey from ghosts literally testifying in court,
which is wild,
all the way to the birth of modern forensic science.
Yeah, and to really appreciate how far we've come, you have to picture like a split screen.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So on one side, imagine a modern crime lab today. If a body is found, this massive, highly specialized operation kicks into gear following the 5WH principle. Who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Right, the absolute basics of modern investigation.
Exactly. You have odontologists mapping out bite marks, anthropologists piecing together skeletal remains, and analysts calculating the exact velocity of blood spatter droplets based on physics.
It's a whole army of specialists.
It is. But now look at the other side of the screen, medieval Europe. While China had Sung Tz'u compiling his brilliant manual, The Washing Away of Wrongs, Europe wouldn't see that level of basic medical logic applied to crime for another, 600 years.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if Europe didn't have Sung Tz'u's scientific method, how on earth were they solving crimes?
Well, that's the thing. They weren't.
Right. Investigating a murder back then was like trying to solve a puzzle in the dark wearing oven mitts, so you just ask a psychic to describe the picture for you. Without basic biology or chemistry, what were investigators actually looking for at a crime scene?
They weren't looking for physical clues at all, honestly. They were looking for divine intervention.
Divine intervention, really?
Yeah. Without science, the justice system relied entirely on theology and the supernatural. The prevailing belief was that God wouldn't allow a murder to go unpunished, so the universe itself would just provide a sign.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it was terrifying. Let's look at a case from 1631 in County Durham to see how bad this reality actually was. So, a pregnant housekeeper named Anne Walker was murdered. Her employer, John Walker, was the father, and he hired a local miner named Mark Sharp to kill her with a coal pick and hide her body.
Okay, so a horrible, brutal crime, but a very common earthly motive. There's nothing supernatural about a cover-up.
Nothing at all. But the mechanism for catching them was entirely spectral.
Wait, spectral? Like ghosts?
Literally ghosts. A local miller named Graham went to a magistrate and claimed that Anne's ghost appeared to him in a dream, covered in blood, and gave him a play-by-play of her own murder.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, and it gets crazier. Graham reported this. The authorities found the body where the ghost supposedly indicated, and a trial took place. During the proceedings, the judge and at least one jury member claimed they actually saw the apparition of Anne and her baby walking right there in the courtroom.
Wait. They allowed a ghost's testimony on the official court record. How do you even cross-examine a phantom?
You don't. And that's the point. Both John Walker and Mark Sharp were found guilty and hanged that very same day.
That is insane.
Their execution was based on a dream and like a mass hallucination in the courtroom.
That's completely wild. But, it gets even stranger because they also utilize this absurd concept called the bleeding corpse test.
Oh, right. The bleeding corpse test.
Yeah, so in 1684, there was this case involving a woman named Elizabeth Ridgway. She poisoned her husband, Thomas, with white mercury mixed into his broth, which, by the way, is a slow, agonizing way to die.
Extremely painful, yeah.
But when the magistrate ordered an inquest, they didn't look for poison in his stomach or, examine his symptoms. Instead, they forced Elizabeth to physically touch her husband's exhumed corpse.
Which sounds more like a horror movie than a trial.
Totally. And the court record claims that when she touched him, he burst out bleeding from the nose and mouth, and I quote, as if newly stabbed.
What's fascinating here is how the complete absence of scientific understanding just turns the courtroom into this bizarre theater.
Yeah, but I'm hung up on the logic of it. She used mercury poison. Why would they look for a bleeding nose? That makes absolutely zero anatomical sense.
Well, it makes no sense to us because we understand biology, but to a 17th century magistrate, it made perfect theological sense.
Right, because of the whole God will provide a sign thing.
Exactly. They believed a corpse would physically react to the presence of its murderer. But what they were actually witnessing was a very natural, albeit gruesome, process of decomposition.
Okay, break that down for us. What was actually happening?
So when a person dies, the bacteria normally present in the digestive tract begin to multiply unchecked. As they break down tissues, they produce massive amounts of gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide.
So the body is essentially turning into a biological pressure cooker.
That is a perfect way to describe it. The pressure builds up inside the abdomen and chest cavity. That trapped gas has to go somewhere.
Right.
So it forces liquefied tissues, purged fluids, and degrading blood up to the windpipe and out of the easiest exit points, which are the nose and mouth.
Gross, but logical.
Right. Now imagine a corpse that's been sitting for a few days full of this pressurized gas. You haul a suspect in, you force them to physically press their hands onto the body or move it.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, that physical disturbance shifts the pressure and suddenly fluid purges from the mouth. To a magistrate who doesn't know about intestinal bacteria, that's a miracle from God proving guilt.
And it was completely lethal for the accused. It just applied physics, but it was interpreted as witchcraft. It actually reminds me of the Pendle witch trials. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, take the case of Janet Preston in 1612. A dying man named Thomas Lister cried out in his sickbed that she was laying heavy on him.
Which was enough to condemn someone back then.
Just based on that. So when he died, they dragged her in, forced her to touch his corpse, and predictably, the pressure shifted and the body purged fluid. They claimed it bled fresh blood, and she was hanged in York for witchcraft.
It's tragic. In a world terrified of the unknown and without, the microscope or the scalpel to illuminate the facts, society just clung to whatever narrative offered closure. If the narrative required a witch, the physics of decomposition were twisted to prove she was a witch.
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second. The source material mentions that in the 14th century Isle of Wight, people were 400 times more likely to be stabbed to death than they are today.
Right, violence was everywhere.
So if murder was that incredibly common, wouldn't society have been forced to get better at investigating it? You'd think sheer self-preservation would demand some kind of functional investigative system.
It's a logical assumption, but historically, narrative always trumped science. If a powerful, politically useful story could be told, the physical evidence was simply ignored.
Interesting.
Yeah, society didn't need to find the literal killer. They needed to restore order through a story. Think about the assassination of Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in 1170.
Oh, right. The knights in the cathedral.
Exactly. He was confronted by 4 knights. They hacked him to death with broadswords. Eyewitness accounts say one knight even stood on Becket's neck and scattered his brains across the stone floor. It's a highly physical, messy crime scene.
Yeah, a modern crime scene investigator would have a field day mapping out that cathedral. You'd have blood spatter analysis, weapon impressions, everything.
But none of that happened. There was no post-mortem. There was no criminal trial for the knights.
Wait, really? None at all?
None. Why? Because the moment he died, the focus instantly shifted to religion. Becket was declared a martyr, and the public's attention was directed toward the supposed miracles happening at his tomb.
So the guys who did it just walked away?
Pretty much. The actual killers lived full lives. The political and religious narrative was vastly more important to the state than the forensic reality.
Wow. And, when that storytelling instinct turns dark, the results are catastrophic. The book covers this really grim case from 1255 with a 9-year-old boy named Hugh of Lincoln.
Right. And we should be clear, this is a very dark, historically sensitive topic covered in the book, but we're just reporting what the sources say happened historically.
Absolutely. We are just conveying the historical reality as documented. So the boy's body was found in a well. And instead of looking at the physical evidence, like checking for water in the lungs to confirm drowning, looking for defensive wounds, establishing a time of death, the chroniclers just invented a completely baseless narrative.
They did.
They claimed it was a ritual sacrifice by the local Jewish community.
Yeah. It's a textbook historical example of the blood libel, which was an entirely fabricated anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Because there was no established scientific protocol for examining a victim, there was this massive information void.
And people just filled that void with their own prejudice.
Exactly. Society filled it with bigotry. King Henry III utilized this unscientific hysteria to execute innocent Jewish citizens. Without a forensic system anchoring the truth to physical evidence, bigotry easily becomes the lead investigator.
It really highlights the danger of an information void. But here's where it gets really interesting, though. This habit of prioritizing a comfortable narrative over physical evidence isn't just ancient history. We are still dealing with it right now.
Oh, you mean The Princes in the Tower?
Yes, the ultimate British cold case. The 2 young nephews of Richard III who vanished in 1483.
It's a perfect example of historical narrative clashing with modern science.
Right. So back in 1674, workmen are doing some renovations and they find human bones buried in the rubble of the Tower of London. Without a single shred of scientific proof, no anatomy check, no dating, a royal surgeon just declares, yep, these are the murdered princes, and they get sealed up in a fancy urn in Westminster Abbey.
Just based on a guess.
Completely. Then, in 1933, they open the urn again. A doctor looks at a partial jawbone and just guesses their identities all over again. It's still totally unscientific.
And we could fix that today.
Exactly. Today, we could easily solve this. We literally used DNA to identify Richard III under a parking lot in 2013. We could swab those bones in the urn, map the genome against living relatives, and know the truth definitively.
But we haven't.
No. King Charles III has refused permission to test them. So technically, the king is obstructing a police investigation into a 500-year-old double homicide.
That's a funny way to put it, but it perfectly illustrates the ongoing tension. We now possess the tools to wash away centuries of guesswork, but the human element, the guardians of the established narratives, still hold the keys.
Yeah, they don't want to upset the apple cart.
Exactly. The monarchy's history is built on certain narratives being true. Introducing DNA testing threatens to complicate a very neat historical story.
So how did we finally break out of this? How did we transition from a world of bleeding corpses and royal decrees to actually looking at a crime scene with objective eyes?
It required a fundamental shift in how humanity viewed the physical body itself. For centuries, the church had strict moral objections to dissection.
Right. The body was sacred.
Yes, the body was sacred, not to be cut open and studied. But as the Renaissance took hold, those doors slowly opened. The very first recorded human autopsy took place at the University of Bologna in 1200, purely to understand anatomy.
Okay, so baby steps.
Huge baby steps. Then in 1591, the microscope was invented, revealing this whole universe of detail the naked eye couldn't see. By 1773, a chemist devised a reliable system to detect arsenic inside the tissues of a human body. Finally, law and medicine were starting to speak the same language.
And that leads to one of my absolute favorite aha moments in history from the source material. We're in 1784. A man named Edward Colshaw is murdered in Lancaster with a pistol shot.
This is such a great case.
It's so good. Now, we have to understand how a muzzle-loaded pistol worked back then for this to make sense. You poured gunpowder down the barrel, dropped in a lead ball, and then you had to ram a piece of paper wadding down on top of it to pack it all tightly together before firing.
Right, otherwise it wouldn't fire properly.
Exactly. So when Colshaw was shot at close range, that paper wadding was blasted right into the fatal wound.
Just a tiny, seemingly insignificant piece of debris.
Exactly. But the doctor doing the examination didn't just ignore it. He pulled out this bloody piece of paper wadding, carefully unrolled it, and wiped the blood off. It turned out to be a torn fragment of printed sheet music.
Okay.
And then investigators searched a man named John Toms, who was an acquaintance of the victim. Inside his pocket, they found the rest of that exact sheet music.
Wow.
Yeah. They held the bloody scrap from the victims wound up to the paper in the suspect's pocket, and the torn edges locked together perfectly. John Toms went to the gallows based on 2 pieces of matching paper.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a watershed moment in human history.
It really is.
This is the exact pivot point where tangible, physical, matching evidence put a man on the gallows instead of a ghost story. The puzzle pieces of a crime scene were finally being treated as objective facts. It didn't require divine intervention or an interpretation of a corpse's purge fluid. It just required realizing that a torn edge acts like a proto-fingerprint.
Okay, so by the early 1800s, they have matching physical evidence, they understand basic chemistry, they're doing autopsies. Crime solving should be getting pretty sophisticated by now. Why was it still such a disaster?
Well, because scientific capability is entirely useless without a functional infrastructure to manage it.
Human error.
Yep. Having a microscope doesn't help if your police force is utterly incompetent. Let's look at London in 1811. The policing situation was an absolute bureaucratic nightmare. There was no centralized Scotland Yard yet.
Just a bunch of local guys.
Pretty much. London wasn't policed as one city. It was a patchwork of individual parishes, each paying for their own cheap security. The frontline defense in places like the Ratcliffe Highway, which was this squalid, bustling dockland area, were what they called Charlies.
Oh, the parish watchmen.
Right. These were superannuated men, often in their 60s or older, armed with nothing but a lantern, a rattle, and a club. They spent most of their shifts hiding from the rain inside little wooden watch boxes.
Not exactly a crack tactical team.
Not at all. You also had Bow Street runners and local magistrates, all with overlapping jurisdictions, jealously guarding their own territory. If a major crime happened, no single authority was actually in charge of the scene.
And a major crime is exactly what hit them in December 1811, the Ratcliffe Highway murders.
It was horrific.
It starts with the Marr family. Timothy, his wife Celia, their young apprentice, and their 14-week-old baby boy. It's a complete family annihilation. Their skulls were shattered with a heavy tool. The brutality is just staggering. And then 12 days later, the Williamson family is slaughtered in almost the exact same way at a local pub.
And the entire city of London basically loses its mind.
Total panic.
Yeah, and that mass panic completely exposes the structural failure of the parish watch system. The crime scenes were a goldmine of physical evidence, but the investigation was a masterclass in agonizing incompetence because no one knew how to secure a perimeter or process a clue.
It's so painful to read about. I mean, they had muddy footprints leading right away from the Marr house, and they just ignored them. They didn't cast them or even try to follow the tracks.
Yep.
And the murder weapon. They found a heavy ship carpenter's maul left at the scene. It was covered in blood and had matted hair stuck to it.
Which is prime evidence.
Right. But what did the authorities do? They washed it. They literally took the most important piece of forensic evidence and scrubbed it clean in a bucket of water.
I know, it's mind-boggling. But they did that because they still hadn't fully conceptualized trace evidence. To a local magistrate in 1811, the blood and hair weren't clues. They were just dirt on an object.
So they were just tidying up.
Essentially, yes. By washing it, they destroyed crucial biological evidence. It was only by sheer luck, after cleaning it, that someone noticed the initials JP punched into the metal head. And it gets worse.
How could it get worse than washing the murder weapon?
Well, instead of cordoning off the Marr house, they left the bodies laid out and allowed the public to wander through. People were paying to trample through the crime scene like it was a macabre tourist attraction, obliterating any trace evidence that might have been on the floors or doors.
So, with the crime scene destroyed, no useful evidence, and the public demanding an arrest, what does this disorganized mess of a police force do?
They do what panic systems do. They just find a scapegoat.
Exactly. The authorities were desperate for a quick public relations victory to calm the hysteria.
And the country was at war with Napoleon, xenophobia was rampant, so the magistrates just started rounding up foreign sailors in the docklands.
Right. They eventually zeroed in on a young Irish sailor named John Williams. He lodged at a nearby pub called the Pear Tree. He was a bit of a dandy, he liked to drink, and he happened to be out late on the nights in question.
And that was the entirety of their case.
That was it. But before Williams could even stand trial or mount a defense, he was found hanging from an iron bar in his prison cell, dead.
Convenient.
Very. And the police, they essentially just shrug, declare the case closed, and parade his dead body through the streets. They completely ignore the fact that the bloody mall with the initials JP actually belonged to a man named Johann Petersen.
Unbelievable.
Petersen had left that mall in an unlocked tool chest at the exact same pub where John Williams stayed. They never even bothered to look for him.
It's a devastating conclusion. The Ratcliffe Highway murders prove a vital point that still resonates today. Scientific tools and physical evidence are entirely useless if the human systems managing them are ruled by prejudice, a lack of communication, and a desperate need to close a case quickly.
Yeah.
They had the murder weapon, they had the initials, they had the footprints, but human error, jurisdictional petty squabbles, and bias washed the truth away just as surely as they washed that hammer.
It's such a stark reminder for us today. You can sit on your couch, fire up a true crime documentary, and casually critique the angle of a blood spatter or analyze the suspect's cell phone tower pings. We take this forensic precision totally for granted. We just expect the puzzle pieces to fit.
We absolutely expect certainty. But it's vital to remember the centuries of bleeding corpses, ghostly testimonies, and horribly botched crime scenes it took to give us the privilege of that scientific certainty. The framework of modern justice was built through a lot of painful trial and error.
Which brings me to one final thought for you to take away from all of this. Let's circle back to King Charles III and the princes in the tower.
Okay, bringing it full circle.
Think about the implications of the technology we have right now. If the king eventually yields and allows modern DNA testing on those bones in that urn, what happens next? If we open the door to retroactively applying modern forensics to historical graves, how much of our established history is going to be overturned?
It's a massive question.
How many royal lineages, how many religious martyrdoms, and how many bedrock textbook facts will be completely rewritten by a single swab of DNA? Are we really ready for the blowflies to finally land on the truth? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the messy, fascinating history of forensic science. We'll see you next time.